Hello, lovely podcast people. I hope you're well. I joked to someone the other day that I was going to start this podcast. Hello, lovely podcast people. This episode is sponsored by Micronutrient Uni because, and then I went on, because we were thinking about doing some kind of sponsored adverts for Micronutrient Uni enrollments this year. Enrollments coming up in July 13th-ish, I think, enrollments open for the September intake. And the price of some people think that they are able to charge. I mean, I say think, maybe they are, maybe people are paying those things. What was funny though is I got Lucy, who's kind of social media superstar, executive, podcast editor extraordinaire. I got her to do a bit of research. She's always kind of saying, oh, like you've just come up in the top 20 podcasts in XYZ country or something like that. It's cool. Oh, you've just like entered into this category, blah, blah, blah. The podcast's flying. I'm super happy. So just to say thank you so much to everyone who's like leaving reviews and listening regularly and subscribing and whatever. And it's so hard to know exactly how these charts are done, so you can't really manipulate them and just, I mean, it's never been the goal, right? This was a bit of a hobby that just got a bit out of hand. But yeah, like these people charging like $2,000 an episode. And yeah, they've got successful podcasts, but they're like rated at the same level as me. Obviously, my podcast has seemingly become quite highly rated on for whatever reason, you guys listening regularly. Anyway, it's mental. So then my friend said, well, maybe you need to start doing adverts on your podcast of your own stuff. Anyway, so that's my advert. MNU enrollments open 13th of July. You make sure you're in the MNU updates list, actually, because we are doing some announcements. If you are someone who wants to do that, get involved. If you want to do the course year, make sure you're on the priority list. In fact, you know what? Show notes this week, I'm going to link you to the MNU updates list where we'll send out some free stuff, some free lectures from the course and whatnot. When the prospectus is launched, it's going to be so pimp. We'll send that out. You probably don't want that if you're not going to do the course, but you want the free lectures even if you're not. Anyway, where was I? Let's do this episode, shall we? This one is kind of a listener questions episode. If you're not aware, you can go on my website, martin-macdonald.com, and there's a button you can click and you can make suggestions. You can literally write whole episodes for me and I will record them just for you. Basically, what do you think needs to be said? What needs to be covered? What questions would you ask me if you were like a guest, host, questioner, interviewer, person? And I've done those before. And what Lucy did was went through and got all of the questions that were on this topic, which essentially is micronutrients. And I've picked the top, I don't know, or just questions that are all related to each other. I don't want to take too long. I can do another one if needs be. But this one's about micronutrients. Just loads of questions about, I guess, vitamins and minerals and those sorts of things. So I thought I'd cover just a bit of a hot topic. Just so many of you would answer. It's difficult when you just ask one-off questions, and that's why I wait until there's a few in a similar area to do an episode like this. Anyway, question 1. Is fruit bad for your gains? I have 2 oranges a day and my coach removed them. You should remove your coach from your life. As he said, the vitamin C in them will blunt the hypertrophy effect. Painful. Is this based on the science? No, it's not. Wow. I mean, you've not even said I was eating 2 oranges immediately post-training as my source of carbohydrate, which it would still not cause ill effect, but maybe, there'd be, it's just bonkers. Lots of this podcast is going to be about, the magnitude of the effect of certain things and also and then sometimes just, if you were in any way, shape or form, if you were the world's most elite bodybuilder and you needed every ounce, when you're an elite professional bodybuilder, you can do so much with all the insane amounts of drugs that are being taken these days, which actually very sadly, as a point, is killing people, which is very sad because of the way the sport is pushing people. I saw Jordan Peters do a very well-worded post on this, essentially saying the sport needs to call for people to stop being crazy. Anyway, where was I? It would be irrelevant. Sometimes when you're at the upper echelons of a sport and you want to push the boundaries, you do every little thing. But my guess is, no offense, question asker, that's not you. But even then, would it make any difference? So the point being, let me just quickly talk to you about the science. The science in this area is interesting in that there was this idea that, we want loads of antioxidants, when we found out about free radicals and oxidation and the damage caused by training. And, we want to reduce inflammation. We want to reduce oxidative stress, blah, blah, blah. And when these things happen, we the industry and even the researchers and the practitioners, we all jump on stuff. It's like, wow, this is so cool. What do we need to do? And it's very human nature to kind of rush on in. But we now know that potentially we don't want to. So like ibuprofen, massive. There's some decent data on very, very high level, actually. I say high level, high prolonged dosing with high amounts of ibuprofen, for instance, reducing inflammation, but then that will blunt some of the adaptive response to exercise that would make you repair and build muscle, which I won't go into that actually. But anyway, we now know that supplementing with super high doses of antioxidants might also have a similar impact in terms of reducing some of the signaling around muscle repair, muscle gain, protein synthesis. And so it has been done in rat studies, for instance. I mean, rat studies are horrible when you really think about them. I probably shouldn't for any of my vegetarian and vegan listeners, or even just conscious meat-eating omnivores. People who just sort of care a bit about animals. Rats and low on my list of animals. But when you just hear about them having their muscles removed surgically so that we can find out. It's basically they cut out some of their muscles in their lower limb to place stress on another muscle, and it'll make that muscle work harder and it gets bigger. Anyway, they've done that study, and then they feed them super high amounts of vitamin C. And this is what I'm going to link here, this whole fruit thing, fruit. Oh yeah, sorry, it did say vitamin C in the question. Vitamin C will blunt the hypertrophy effect. And in these studies, they use insane dosages. So I'm not an animal study or a cell study expert in any way, shape or form. But I just have this basic understanding from listening to people who are experts in those areas. So not only do we need to account sometimes for things like body weight. So 500 milligrams of vitamin C to a rat is very different when we make it relative to body weight. So if I take 500 milligrams of vitamin C and a rat does, the milligrams per kilogram of that is very different. Now in some of these rat studies, they literally use 500 milligrams per kilogram. So that's like me using 45 whatever grams, 45,000 milligrams of vitamin C. But on top of that, you also then take into account other things in terms of a rat's metabolism being very different. So if you fast for a day as a human, it's a bit, because of the difference in metabolic rate from a rat to a human, it's a bit like fasting. If you fast a rat for a day, it's like fasting a human for a fortnight. It's a very different scenario you're talking about. Anyway, so in these studies, yes, they have done it in animals, and it has reduced the muscle hypertrophy response. They do some rats without the vitamin C and some with the vitamin C, but it's a very different scenario. And they have then done. I don't think I've ever seen a vitamin C only study in humans, but it's not an area of expertise of mine, a particular interest of mine. But I know there are multiple studies, and there's a meta-analysis which I'll link you to. But it's more often than not like a combination of antioxidants like vitamin E plus vitamin C that's used. And even in some human studies, you'll see, again, these doses is 500 milligrams, 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C total. And then, 300 milligrams of vitamin E. And you'll see maybe a slight change in, and I'll just say this again, I use this word pragmatically quite often. If we're going to be pragmatic, we need to discuss you said 2 oranges a day. So I'm not even sure if you're eating them together. I'm not even sure what size those oranges are. But let's say you're eating 2 big oranges together around training. We're talking 100 milligrams of vitamin C-ish. Okay, so these studies using 1,000, it's 10 times as much. And in fact, when I think about it, there's a study in the elderly, don't know the author, but I'll find it and link it. And it's like 500 milligrams of vitamin C pre-training and 500 milligrams post-training. So it's literally, whatever that is, 20 oranges, 10 oranges pre, 10 oranges post. And it was like a super small, but I believe in that. But it was also with high dose vitamin E at the same time. So I think it was say 1 to 200 milligrams before and 1 to 200 after, with the vitamin C. Specific supplementation, again, not just from a fruit. And they slightly reduced the hypertrophy response of a training program. So it's astronomically higher than your 2 oranges in a day. My point being with this is, going back to what I said at the beginning, if you're a super high level athlete and you're really worried about this, just don't eat the oranges immediately around training. Like, it's going to make no difference, but if you're worried about it, just don't have them around training. It's about being pragmatic about your life and the fact that you want to eat oranges. And, if you eat any fruit or vegetables, you're going to get some vitamin. You eat a red bell pepper. Has your coach removed all sources of vitamin C from your diet? It's craziness. They probably don't know how much vitamin C is in an orange. So I would, this is why I'm against supplementation of high doses of things unless you're knowing, and we'll talk about this maybe later in the podcast. But when it comes to food, there's just no issue. I'll link you to a meta-analysis which basically says that, like, these things aren't going to benefit your training. They're not going to, potentiate the muscle gain effect of your training. And in the long term, high dose supplementation may reduce it a little bit. So don't take those supplements. But eating a couple of oranges, no effect. I'm going to leave it there. Question 2. When taking vitamins, so I've combined these 2 questions actually because they sort of the same thing. When taking vitamins, in this example, iron, does it matter when you take it and what you take it with? And then someone else's question was, do the tannins in tea or caffeine in coffee, we can forget about the caffeine really, there are also some tannins in coffee, really affect the absorption of iron and other supplements to such an extent that we should wait an hour before taking them, or can I have my morning coffee with iron and vitamin C and still get the benefit? Now, here's the question just quickly. Why are you taking vitamin C in the morning? Why do you think you need to do that in particular? Now, in this instance, if you want to take the vitamin C, you're just taking a low dose just because maybe you don't eat enough fruit and vegetables and you feel like that's going to benefit you or whatever. Realistically, I'm going to talk about multivitamins in a minute. Like, there's just so little need to be taking lots of vitamin C. Jumping onto the iron situation, iron is one of those things you really shouldn't be supplementing with regularly with complete disregard for how much you're consuming and what your bodily levels are. Like, iron is one of those ones, it's a mineral and you can have too much. So that's my first thing to say here, because you're talking about supplementation. Now, if we look at studies around this area, there's a few things here in that supplementation versus fortified foods versus foods that already contain iron. Now, where lots of this comes from is non-heme iron sources. So if you are vegan or vegetarian, this is potentially good information for you to consider. If you're vegetarian, you're consuming lots of dairy. Like, for instance, I'm trying to think. No, I didn't write any notes on. That's a shame. But the things I want to cover here are calcium, tannins, as has been mentioned, and then also phytates. So there's lots of myths out there around, oh, you shouldn't eat legumes, you shouldn't eat whole grains. They've got phytic acid in them. These phytates are reducing your absorption of really important nutrients. And the thing with this is there is an element of truth in what these individuals are saying. The difference is they completely ignore the fact that when we eat certain foods, they actually promote the absorption. So the absorption of things like, well, we'll stick to iron. With vitamin C, it will increase the absorption. So there's lots at play here in terms of if you're someone who is anemic, you have really low iron levels. And I think now that I'm saying this out loud, I may be thinking of a different study actually, but essentially I'm thinking like there was a study like in Gambian children where they looked at iron status, but now I'm thinking it was vitamin A status, so ignore me. Anyway, so with iron, it's like, okay, I've been told I've got low iron levels. I'm also a vegetarian. I consume a lot of milk and a lot of cheese or whatever, and so calcium will reduce our absorption of iron. But so in that instance, it's like, I know I'm kind of screwed. I know I've already got low iron levels. I need to be careful. If you start supplementing with a high level of iron, really, you probably don't need to change your diet all that much. But then if you supplement with iron, you get your levels back to normal. You don't want to go back to a point of being deficient in iron. So, actually, I was consuming high amounts of calcium or calcium-containing foods with meals where I'm getting my iron. Now, as a vegan or vegetarian, you'll be getting a large amount of non-heme iron, which the conversion of non-heme to heme iron, the kind of usable form, is very inefficient. So you need to consume lots and lots of non-heme iron. And if you are then consuming that with calcium, there becomes an issue. Calcium doesn't impact heme iron, i.e. the iron that you're just going to get from your red meat type sources, animal sources. It only has a very small impact on the absorption of that. It has a much larger impact on non-heme iron, just like phytates do, and tannins, and things like this. So I actually did a funny story. I mean, I thought it was funny. People thought it was funny at the time. My mum was like, "Oh, and you need to have tea with your chocolate. If you're going to have," and whenever I have chocolate, I love a cup of tea, right? And it's just, I think, probably been socialized into me by my mum. But she was like, yeah, well, it's good to have tea with chocolate because it reduces some of the calories that you absorb. And I was like, sorry, what? She was like, yeah, like iron. I was like, oh my goodness. She's just gone, yeah, tea just, the tannins, they're going to take the calories away. Like, brilliant. Imagine that. How cool would that be? Anyway, so where was I? These things reduce your absorption. And so if you're a vegetarian, that's what I was saying, you need to just be wary of these things. So like a glass of milk, for instance, might contain enough calcium in it to reduce your absorption of non-heme iron by like 20%. Now, so it's not astronomical figures we're talking about here. And likewise, if you then have some vitamin C, so there's been studies done on phytates, phytic acid, I believe, and I don't know why, I think it was maybe something else. Maybe it was tannic acid, which is the version of tannins. But essentially, then adding some ascorbic acid, vitamin C, into the situation, and it just a really, really, really small amount, like 20 or let me think what it would be, like 20 milligrams of vitamin C, 25 grams of vitamin C, dramatically sort of attenuating, like reducing the negative impact of these tannins in reducing your iron content. So it's all getting a bit complicated, right? So vitamin C promotes the absorption of iron. Calcium phytates, and I'm just going to say this, right? Like a red bell pepper, if you just had like a quarter or half a red bell pepper in a meal that contained a whole grain which had some phytates in it, which you've already cooked, so that'll probably reduce the level of phytates in it, is pretty much enough to just negate that effect. When we look at the needs of individuals and the like, when you talk about RNIs, reference nutrient intakes, or people more commonly refer to them as like RDAs, but the RDA I think has been retired now. But when you look at your RDA for the minerals, these things are taken into account. It's taken into account in terms of the context of a whole diet, where you're going to have some vitamin C, but you're also going to have some phytic acid from a whole grain source, for instance. So it's not too much to worry about. Now, in this question, you're talking about, when I'm taking vitamins and minerals, the question for me remains of like, why are you taking them? Does it matter what I take it with, and these kind of things? It's like, well, why are you taking them in the first place? My only really broad spectrum recommendation sometimes is if you know your diet's quite inadequate, if you're in like a harsh calorie deficit, for instance, or you're working with a client who has quite a restricted range of foods and you're trying to work on them with their nutrition and blah blah blah, then like a broad spectrum multivitamin mineral, which often won't contain something like iron that we're talking about here, because over supplementation of that can be an issue. If we've got water soluble vitamins, the B vitamins, they're often dosed quite high. Vitamin C, they're just essentially flushed out of the system. But with your vitamin A and D, and things like iron and zinc, we don't want to be over supplementing them, especially with just like individual supplementation, because we can get too much of them. We can get, zinc toxicity is a thing. You're taking a ZMA to boost your testosterone, and then you're taking a zinc and vitamin C for your boosting your immunity, and then you're taking a multivitamin with zinc in it. Like, zinc toxicity is an issue that you need to be wary of. And this is why I just almost never recommend the individual dosing of different vitamins and minerals. And even don't across the board go, everyone should take a vitamin and mineral. It's still on a case-by-case basis. I'm not hugely against it, but just with a level of, actually, I just might pay attention to whether or not I really need that or not. So I think I've kind of answered this. Like, if you are specifically taking iron for a reason because you have low iron levels, yeah, probably just as a rule of thumb, don't take it with a milky cup of tea, because that's going to reduce your intake. There's also, I guess, when taking vitamins, like vitamin D, for instance, is slightly improved by taking with I recently re-recorded the supplement lecture for MNU to update it with some different studies and whatnot. And this is lots of the stuff that you learn on MNU in terms of, again, we'll talk about the exact amounts of vitamin D that someone should be taking. And also then if you take vitamin D with a fat source, a fat sauce, that sounds like, coconut sauce or a nice cream sauce. No, but a source of fat, it will slightly enhance the absorption, and there will be a statistically significant difference in subjects that would take it with a fat source. But logistically and pragmatically in the real world, the impact of that in terms of the amount of supplementation that we're recommending, it doesn't make a great deal of difference. So yeah, the next question that was on from here was like, Dr. Google says not to take sups at bedtime. Is this more of a personal preference thing? If you don't get an upset stomach from them, then go ahead. Now, actually, now that I've got these here in front of me, I'm not sure which supplements this was relating to. But again, if you are taking a multivitamin and mineral, for instance, and you're also having, for instance, some Greek yogurt before bed because you're training and you're trying to promote muscle recovery, or like a milk protein or a casein protein shake pre-bed, lots of calcium in that, and it might be reducing the absorption of some of the minerals in that supplement. So, but realistically, I mean, you have just said supplements. Like, what supplements? Like, cool, take your fish oils and your vitamin D with your protein shake or Greek yogurt or whatever before bed. Absolutely fine. It's just worth bearing in mind, if you're using like a vitamin and mineral multi-supplement, sometimes they throw in some other herbs and whatnot in there, and how much do you trust the brand that you're using to not have it contaminated ever so slightly with a few milligrams of caffeine, which is not unheard of at all in the supplement industry. So anyway, I'm going to leave that there. Question 5. So I've heard you talk about multivitamins before. At what point should we consider them? I feel like I've covered this now, Keith. So I probably won't delve much further into that. I will just say on that point, it's years and years ago, I wrote a sort of daily diet type thing that went in a big magazine or newspaper. This like 10 years ago. And it went to, I'm trying to remember it's like the advertising standards type thing that gets checked before it goes out. Because I think it was maybe going on TV somewhere or something like that. Anyway, and it went to this professor of dietetics, and it came back and it had corrections on it. And I was like, obviously immediately, all right, let's see what's going on here. And because I put oats for breakfast, it was, I don't know, it was like oats, yogurt and blueberries, for instance, or something. And it had come back. This meal plan does not contain any fortified cereals, and therefore it does not meet the guidelines. I was like, right, interesting. Like, not is the entirety of this sort of food plan adequate. It was just, you don't have any fortified cereals on here. Anyway, then I had a section that had something about that mentioned like fish oils, maybe vitamin D, and a multivitamin and mineral. And then it was like the use of a multivitamin and mineral is unnecessary and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, sorry, a minute ago you were telling me I needed to use a fortified cereal, which is still, man-made vitamins and minerals baked into the cornflakes that you're probably sponsored by, pal. It was a woman, but I'm calling her pal. I couldn't believe it. I was like, you're kidding me. You're saying that I can't give oats for breakfast. I need to put basically cornflakes et al. And it was madness. And then another comment was, there doesn't seem to be, there's inadequate portions of dairy in this diet. And there was like 2 protein shakes, like whey protein shakes. It was like, this could lead to low intakes of calcium. And again, I obviously sent it back and didn't change anything. I was like, you're a moron, blah, blah, and blah, blah, blah. Look up the calcium in whey protein. I think maybe even it got some snarky remarks about using protein shakes as well. Anyway, ridiculous. So multivitamins, I'm just saying, sometimes people go into like a healthy diet, whatever that may be. And, for instance, I don't give the babies cereals that often. They love toast. And I'm aware when they don't have cereals that vitamin D is something that is recommended for young children. And they don't get their vitamin D if I don't give them cereal. They don't ask for cereal. So then I've gone out of my way to find like a decent sort of fruit and fiber type fortified cereal that they like, that they'll have. And then, I ended up getting these like chocolate pockets because it just looked like they would taste nice and they were fortified. And then it turns out they don't like them. Crazy kids. They don't, do they not? I bought them Nutella once and they didn't like it. And I was like, I don't know if you can be my children. They're only half mine. So I just thought, oh, you just got this crazy gene that doesn't like Nutella from like the other person involved. Because, I'm just so disappointed in you right now. No, anyway. I've just got them some gummies now that they can have their vitamin D from and whatever, and that's all sorted. But it does just take me back to, like, if you go from eating cereal for breakfast and if any of your practitioners and you put your client onto oats, for instance, oats aren't fortified a lot of the time, most of the time, almost all of the time. So just bearing in mind that you're then now reducing some of their nutrient intake. If you then improve their whole diet dramatically, fantastic, all good. But it's just something I think you can sometimes forget as a practitioner. Anyway, how long have I been going for? Probably long enough. Do you know what? I'm going to leave it there because I feel like I've chatted and chatted and chatted. And I can now just do another episode on a different topic. Right. Hope you've enjoyed that. Thanks for all your reviews. Make sure you sign up for those things in the show notes that I mentioned at the beginning. Thanks to our sponsor of the show, Nutrition Uni, the world's best 12-month online nutrition course you can study anywhere in the world to become a fully qualified, insurable nutritionist working with clients in your own country and online globally. Asterisks, only in countries where we have our bespoke MNU certified nutritionist policy, which is now up to 30 countries around the world. That's pretty good. That's just, I haven't got anything written down to do that. That's just off the top of my head. It's almost like I understand my own business, isn't it? Anyway, much love. I hope you're well. Until next time.